Hi, I'm Jan Broberg, your host and fellow survivor. Welcome to Trauma Interrupted. On this show, we name the wounds that trauma and abuse leave behind. We do the work it takes to heal, and together, we find the way forward. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get to work. Hey, everybody. Happy Pride Month. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see I'm wearing my Care Bears Pride shirt. It's also Juneteenth. And I want to wish all my friends celebrating out there a wonderful day. I hope that everybody is being seen. All my friends in all my various communities that I love, please know that I see you, I hear you, I believe you, and I hope that all of you are experiencing that in your own lives. Today is a great day. This guest has spent years convinced she had no trauma. She had good parents, a loving home, a happy childhood, and yet her body wouldn't stop screaming. Pins and needles down her legs, a knot in her thigh that never released, a mind that couldn't stop running, and a shadow at a doorway that she carried with her since she was 4 years old that she couldn't explain. My guest today is Ro. She's an educator, an author, an entrepreneur from Australia, currently volunteering at a school in India. Ro spent years chasing a diagnosis that didn't fit before somatic therapy cracked something open. What followed were once forgotten memories, a grief she didn't know she was carrying, and a healing journey that's taken her from dark, intrusive thoughts to writing a book, building a business, and crossing the world. This conversation is about what happens when your body knows the truth before your conscious mind does. It's about the courage it takes to start this journey and what becomes possible when you do. We are now on YouTube at Trauma Interrupted, and for more information about our programs for prevention and healing, please visit janbrobergfoundation.org. All survivors and their loved ones are welcome to join us on this journey. Together we rise, together we heal, together we change things for the next generation. And now, welcome to Trauma Interrupted. Let's get to it. Hi, Ro. Here we are in studio with Ro, who is coming to us from India, even though that's not her place, her origin of birth, because her accent is not quite Indian, and we've both been there, and I was so thrilled to find out she was coming to us from India. Hi, Ro. Thank you for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to introduce you a little bit and light a candle for you. I think the things that really stood out to me is how raw you open up and talk about your mental health, the battles that you've had with that, your assault and abuse that you suffered through, and the authenticity of your voice and vulnerability, which is really, really what we need right now. We have, like you said, this huge amount of fake news, this huge amount of fake social media. We're all looking like we're fine, and we put on our best faces and our best pictures, and we're looking for the newest lipstick that's going to solve all our problems, and that's not going to do it, is it?
No, and I have also been guilty of buying that makeup that's going to make me look better.
Yeah, me too, of course, because we're looking for a solution, right? We're looking to those solutions. And I know that what you want to do is to connect with other women in their 40s, like you are, by sharing your personal journey. So I'm going to just light a candle for you today as we talk. It helps me, keeps me, I don't know, in that zone of kindness, understanding, and I feel like every survivor needs a candle to be lit in her
It's a lovely
behalf
gesture.
or his
Thank
behalf.
you.
Yes, and so this is for you, Ro. And I'll tell you what, this is the most delicious smell. It's basically a citrus and bergamot, and it's lovely. So thank you. Tell us a little bit about where this personal journey started in your childhood.
So very recently for me, repressed memories came up of abuse and assault when I was probably around 4. And that came up for me earlier this year when I gave myself time actually, to heal. and focus on me, because I think what most women do is we focus on our families. And of course, that's a really important thing to be doing. But it got to the stage where my children all turned 18, and I thought, I'm still very unhappy. And I've been this way for a number of years now. And it's time that it changes. That's when the exploration started. I and of course, these things take time and money, which are sometimes outside of our resources. But I decided that that was going to be it for me for 12 months. And one of the things that I went to and undertook was somatic therapy, because I had been seeing a psychologist and doing CBT, and that didn't feel like it was bringing anything up for me. I felt like I was just talking about the same things sort of over and over again. And I thought, for me, my depression was very physical. And I had a lot of sensations in my body that were like pins and needles, clumping of my muscles, all that type of thing. And I thought there has to be something in this. And a few years ago, I'd read about somatic experiences and trying to release that energy that's stored in your body. So I finally found somebody local to me to be able to undertake that. And he started talking about trauma. And said to him, I don't feel like I have any trauma. And he's like, there will be something. There'll be something. I think, I actually had an amazing childhood. My parents are so supportive. They've always been there for me, but wonderful grandparents, so great extended family. So thinking, trauma would be, somebody that's been, or, something terrible has happened to them. And, I just 3 years out of a a 20-year-old relationship with the man that became my husband. And I thought, there were good and bad times there, but in the end, I still wouldn't call it traumatic. But as we progressed further and further, the word safety sort of always came up for me in these sessions. And from a child, I'd always had this image of a shadow at a doorway. And that has stuck with me for a very long time. And through the therapy, a face came to the shadow. And then the shadow actually came into the room. And then the memories started coming back regarding what the person had actually done to me. So it was quite then obviously traumatic. And that's when I identified what the trauma was. We used to live in a pub, so you might call it a hotel, which my parents owned and managed. And they used to take in boarders because there was a factory close by, and men would come stay there. And it turns out that it wasn't a close person to me, but it was one of the boarders that was staying there. And he obviously had access to me by staying there. So that's what happened. But I did continue with the CBT therapy, because then I needed somebody to go and talk to about how I was now feeling about what had been raised, what had been remembered, and also ways of talking to other people about it.
So this is really interesting because it's so often, I think, in trying to heal from something that you don't even really know why you're not feeling right. You have this physical manifestation of your depression, where you're physically hurting. It's not just in the mental stages, it's in the body, right? And we talk about that trauma lives in the body. So somehow in you're seeking out the right therapist, trauma informed therapist, that's not an easy thing to find. And doing CBT before and now going back to it after realizing what the trauma was, that's very interesting to me. And you should talk about what CBT is a little bit and your experience with it. What were the things that were happening before? Then you discover the trauma therapist and you do that. and your body is experiencing these reactions, these feelings, these physical feelings about the trauma stored in your body. Then you remember the trauma and now you go back to CBT. Tell us the difference. Tell us what CBT is and then the difference in the two experiences.
Okay, so CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, which very simply is talk therapy. And it's what you'd usually go to for it with a psychologist or a mental health counselor. And
Right.
they just get you to talk about your feelings and what's happening in your life. And you know, that was good. And then they try to ask you things about your childhood because they still think everything stems from your childhood. And I kept saying, no, my childhood was great. Can't fault anything with my parents, the normal things that we
Right.
get upset about, but they were amazing people and still are. But it it just still was not working for me. And I would speak to my general practitioner, and so my doctor, and I would also speak to them about these physical sensations. And they were just constantly telling me it was just a symptom of your depression and anxiety. And that wasn't a good enough answer for me. Like I I was thinking I can't be sitting here and my body is tense. It can never relax. My mind's constantly telling me that I should be doing something. I couldn't get out of that fight and flight zone, and then feeling like pins and needles sensations down your legs or up your arms and it being there constantly, like it doesn't go away. And that's how I was feeling. Yeah, so it was all very physical for me, and I sort of needed like answers to that. Like I tried acupuncture, I tried hypnotherapy, I tried massage, I tried many different things to try and get it all to release, and it couldn't. So when I went to the somatic therapist and he explained to me that it is like there's like a blockage. So all these emotions start, you know, um,
Bubbling up.
not being able, yeah, they're just all bottled up, and all of a sudden it's like, a dam that's releasing, and there's just too much there to overflow, but it wants to overflow, but it can't because it's getting blocked by so many things, which are all the different emotions. And he explained to me that when you've had a trauma in your life, that you then like relive it, your body relives it and it gets stuck in that place where it got stuck the time before. And so from the therapy, which it's definitely not taught therapy, like you're not speaking, you're focusing, like you might say, okay, focus on an area of your body today where you're feeling tightness. So you would focus on the area of the body and they would ask, is there any words or images that come into your mind? And then sometimes there were and sometimes there weren't. But then all of a sudden, when you focus on that spot, your body starts moving. And they're not touching you, they're not doing anything to you, but your body starts moving. And the therapist says that that's your body finally processing the experience that's been stuck inside you. And that you should have experienced all the way through properly previously, but your nervous system stopped it because it was just too much for your body to be able to handle.
Right.
Yeah, so I went to multiple sessions of these and I was thinking, it's starting to feel a little bit better, but I don't know whether this is actually working or not. But I thought to myself, there's times when I am feeling a bit of release. It's nice not to feel like you've got a knot in your thigh or, that your pins and needles aren't there for a couple of hours. And he would also tell me to say things to myself, like remind myself that, I am Roanna or I am Ro, I am 45 years old, and I am safe, and to look around the room and to notice things and to know that I am not what happened to or the thing that happened to me at that time. Um, Then one day we were going through a session and all of a sudden, he also used weighted blankets as part of it to make you feel safe. And I had the weighted blanket on me, and all of a sudden, I just had the need to pull it up over my head. And I was like hiding like a child.
Wow.
Mm. And then I was yelling at him, started yelling at him that he needed to move away from me. And he was very good and then obviously moved away. And he was asking me what the concern was. And I said, there's somebody at the door. And he's like, there's nobody at the door. I'm going to show you that there's nobody at the door. And I said, no, it's like I actually reverted back to being that child and being that age.
Yeah.
And he went to the door and he opened it, but I was still hiding under the blanket. And he was asking me to look, but I just couldn't look. I just couldn't look to see because I just had been taken back to that place that that person would be at the door. He asked again to remind myself of, where I was and what age I was. And then I was finally able to look at the door and notice that there was nobody there because obviously we're in a different time and place. But
Right.
it was good to re-ground myself to know that I was actually safe. And because I'm so much older now and so much more life experience that I wouldn't be put in that same position again. But he also asked you to give compassion to that child. So compassion to yourself for what happened to you at the time and to acknowledge what you would have done for that child if you had been an adult and been aware of what was happening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting because the vision that comes to my mind is you have, this set of dominoes that are all set up, and you can't until you can knock the first one down, the other things don't follow. It's like a blockage. Like when you said that, like it's blocked. And often people are like, well, I don't get it. It lives in your body. What do you mean? What happens is the central nervous system and the brain, they lock it down. They have to go somewhere else to survive. They make sure that you stay alive. But what happens is you're trapped in that, which is interesting, that somatic healing. Somatic is the body itself, that it can heal, but only when it's guided out of the danger zone. And so I think that's really interesting.
So then it brought up so many other things for me. So I've always had an issue with alcohol, as in don't like it, rarely drink, can't stand the smell. And it just showed me that because I had been assaulted living in a pub, which smelled like alcohol, but also the man smelled like alcohol as well. All of those things relate now make so much more sense. I have
Mhm.
control issues. I seriously very much need to be in control. And then that was also flowing through to my children, which was becoming a bit of an issue because they were becoming teenagers and they needed to be able to explore and do different things. But it's because the trauma of me not being safe, I could only control that by being controlling and obviously didn't want that to happen to anybody else that I love.
Right. We want to protect all the other people, which is why we're here having this conversation, because we both are interested in helping other survivors of this kind of trauma. And there's other sorts of trauma, but it has been scientifically, ratified, proven that assault and abuse trauma in childhood, in teen and tweenhood, has the most long term effect on the body, the brain, the central nervous system, and how you function in the world post that trauma of anything. The only other kind of trauma that comes close to that is what a combat veteran experiences in a war zone.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I suppose then the hardest thing for me was too many secrets. So for too many years, there'd been too many things kept secret, but then I needed to tell my parents. And that was very difficult
Yeah.
because my mother was going through cancer treatment at the
Oh,
time that all of this came up. So therefore, I felt like if I told her then, that it would be a burden that she did not need. Um, so my mum's always been my rock, like the person I could talk to about anything, which I'm extremely grateful for, but I couldn't tell her for many months because, she was going through her own journey. Um, but speaking to the CBT therapist, was very good for me to talk to him about when and how, I should tell my parents and and also what I should tell them. And um, he gave me, I suppose, permission to tell them what I needed to tell them, but also in my own time. So they know certain amounts at the moment. And my mum has asked me to tell her more details, but I did say to her, you can never unhear what, you know,
Yeah.
what you're going to hear. So I asked her to take some time to think about that, which she did. And just before I left for my trip to India, she told me that she was ready to hear more, but I just wasn't ready to tell her.
I understand. It took me a very long time to tell my wonderful parents the details, a long time. And it's
Yeah.
because I think we have we have been trying at least to move forward and to move on and to not burden, you used that word, to not
Mm.
burden anybody else with what happened to us. And I remember one time when I was on a phone call and my mom, I was asking her questions and I was writing a paper in college and she said, Jan, you know that we went through the worst even with you being gone, with you being missing. And so you couldn't tell us anything that we would not be able to handle. And we want you to be able to express yourself. And my mother, after all of us daughters, us three girls, had graduated from college, she went back to school and became a social worker. And so my mother had that wonderful kind of even temperament and could work in an industry that I would just be so upset and sad and outraged and mad, but my mother could do it. She had that personality that she could see beyond, you know, where a family was at that moment, and that even if their children had been removed from the home because of some sort of abuse, she could see the pathway forward, whether they could get help, the parent or parents, or whether the child needed a different home. And so, placing kids in foster care or adoptive homes or getting the family reunited, you know, because they went through classes and courses and they're acting out the way that they were treated as children. And it's interesting that we have such love for our good parents and our extended family. And many of my family members were so shocked when the first documentary came out, Abducted in Plain Sight. Some were even mad because everybody loves my dad so much. And why did he say those things? Why didn't you make them take that out? Why did you let him? I'm like, I wasn't in the room when he did his interview. I was shocked when I saw it the first time, and I went home and I told him and I called him, and he's like, I told everything, the truth, because I want to help other people see the predators, because you don't
Hmm.
see them. They look like your best friend. I thought maybe telling my story would help in the cause of why you're telling our story, sweetie. So don't worry about it. I mean, he was really like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, my wonderful dad and mom. It was very hard, but eventually it all came out. But this is just in the past, 10 years, no? And I'm in my early 60s. So you think about that. I understand where you are in your early 40s.
Yeah.
It's difficult when we have good families. And I think for those listening who have good families, and good parents, and that feel like, oh, I can't ever do that, it would hurt my parents too much. I think our parents are stronger than we think.
Well, that's another thing the psychologist said to me when I was talking about it. He said, because obviously being a mother myself, if I had heard something happen to my child, I would know that I'd feel guilt, even though they'd done the best that they could to keep me safe and gave me a loving home and all those things. But he said to me, and it's probably one of the best pieces of advice he gave to me. He said, sometimes you need to let your mother be your mother.
Mm, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Boy, that brings a lot of emotion to me as well.
Yes.
We
So,
took it on, didn't we? We took it on to be mothers, and we want our
yes.
children. I would want my son to tell me, or my stepdaughters. I would want them to talk to me, and I would hope that now I've educated myself in how to respond, and it would be
Mm,
with calmness, like my mother. Very
yeah.
calm, listen, don't talk much, support in that kind, even-tempered way. Because if you get overly emotional or upset or angry, then that young person, even as an adult, you're still a young person in the sight of your parents. You're still a kid, right? It
Yes.
scares you. It scares you from telling or talking any further because you don't want them to be upset. You're now protecting them. And it should be the other way around, no matter your age and your parents' age. Safety became a huge thing for you, didn't it? That feeling of
Mm,
safety with the door, as you were describing that experience with your somatic therapist or somatic healer, whatever they prefer to be called. That to me is like understanding in this moment, am I safe? It's a lot of that kind of Eckhart Tolle kind of thinking. What is the present moment? If we could be in the present moment to see the sky is blue or it's a rainy day and I am here and I am safe and I am just right in this moment. If we could notice more of those moments, that also would help us heal. Notice the
yeah.
many moments.
Mm. I agree. And some of the little strategies that I've read and use are like, when you are starting to feel uncomfortable, what's 5 things that you can see? What's 5 things that you can hear? What could you touch? And just to bring yourself back to the present time. Through it all as well, I had a lot of problems with sleeping. So I had insomnia, not being able to sleep at all, and went down that path, which it makes everything worse,
Yes,
not being able
it
to
does.
sleep.
Sleep is so important,
So
literally so
important.
important.
Yes. And I mean, I still probably only get maybe 5 or 6 hours, but I celebrate that now because there were times when there was not much more happening than an hour or so. So
Oh,
that's like a big step forward for me. And then probably when I was being able to cry. So I wasn't able to cry for a number of years. And when things get bad, I mean, yeah, we all resort to the internet and we Google things. And I Googled, how can you cry? And the first thing that came up was self harm, and I thought to myself, wow, like imagine if a young, because I work with teenage children, Googled that and that's what came up to them. And I had intrusive thoughts at different times. I had, you know, very dark times. But when you reflect on that and you just think that shouldn't be something that pops up as an option, that shouldn't be a thought that's put into somebody's head. And then through the different types of therapy, I've actually been able to cry again, but probably for a month after or 2 months after it all came out, I would probably just sit and cry there most nights, which even though someone might sit there and say, "You're depressed," I wasn't depressed. I was coming out of the depression because I
yeah.
was actually my body was actually feeling things again. It wasn't numb anymore.
Yes, and the thing that's so interesting about tears is they have actual chemical properties that are healing for the body. And I find that really interesting too, because the things that we might say, and people are like, oh, that's just woo woo. I'm like, but it's not. It's actually, there's a reason why, if those parts of us are shut off, they're shut off for a reason. And that's why getting to the bottom of the trauma at 4 years old makes the first domino fall, and everything else that follows is part of the healing. And I had a young woman early on my podcast who was cutting, and she was a young college student, and she just sent me the sweetest message. And she said, "You have no idea how telling somebody what I had been through, I never gave it any thought. I thought that I was just weak, that, it happened when I was a kid and I should be, fine and over it and whatever." She said, "I had no understanding that what I was suppressing was why I was cutting, so I could feel, so I could release." She said, and how destructive that was, but it was that was what I had turned to. And so for me to hear that that would come up first on a social media search, how can I cry? Well, self-harm. Let's harm ourselves.
Mm.
And, it just makes me crazy. I just want to, like, don't do that. Let's get to the bottom of your trauma. Let's talk about it. That's really, really scary to me to hear that.
Yeah, it is really scary. And I think like what you're doing here on this podcast and what I'm trying to do is like when you open up to people now and you start expressing to them like that this is something that's happened to you, it's amazing the amount of people that then say, well, something very similar happened to me.
Yeah.
Mm.
You're doing such a service by sharing your story. You're an educator, right? By profession,
Yes.
you're and a speaker. Tell us a little bit about that, where you have now taken some of these experiences and your own healing in your own mental health. You said there were some really dark times, so I want to hear a little bit more about that, and then what
Mhm.
that journey, this personal journey, where you're at. Like you're in India, like helping at a school. This is
Yes.
a good sign of healing when we start to help others. We go, this is helping me, of course. And that's how I feel about these
Yes.
podcasts. It all helps me too. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and then the darkness of that mental health, those suicidal ideations
Mhm.
and things that happen, and then how you're managing some of those things by what you're doing today as a speaker, as an educator, as an entrepreneur.
So yeah, the what I refer to as the dark times, it all started out initially with like gut health issues. And then when I researched it to know how much the vagus nerve then goes from the stomach to the brain and it's all related. And it's first of all, it started out with that because to be honest, I actually never used to believe in mental health issues. I used to think that people should just go and exercise and everything will be okay, but I was still actively doing all those things. Like I'd run a marathon, I was still running, training, doing gym, but then all of a sudden I had to stop because of these like gastric issues were just becoming too much. And then I started feeling all those sensations in my body. And I was still with my husband at the time, and I said it to him, and he was just like, oh, that's just anxiety. Everybody gets it. And I was like, well, I've never really had it before, so I don't know why. And then I started having really bad thoughts about knives. Um,
Oh,
I could be sitting in the lounge room and our kitchen was not far from it. And I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, there's a knife in the drawer. And I'd be like, why am I thinking about knives? You know, um, and I had another counselor at that time and I mentioned it to them and she was like, this isn't good. And I said, no, I know it's not good. And I had been trying not to go onto medication because, to me, that was the ultimate sign, that I'd probably failed if I went on to medication. But when that started happening and then it started going even into seeing a razor blade or anything like that, I knew that I wasn't allowing my mind to take me to what I wanted to do with those things, but I knew subconsciously why I was thinking about that. So that's the time when I realized that I did need to go onto medication to give my body a break.
Hi, I'm Michaela, and I'm part of the team at the Jan Broberg Foundation, and I want to tell you about something we built called the Survivor Circle. So, the Survivor Circle is a free online community for anyone who has been through trauma or abuse. And it's somewhere you can actually exhale with no pressure, no judgment. It's just people who get it. When you join, you'll meet our community mascot, Dottie and Spotty, and you'll get a warm welcome, a walkthrough of our guidelines, and find your shared ground for sharing. We host circle meetings regularly, round robin and speaker style, and you can share whenever you feel ready. There's also the TIME program, which stands for Trauma, Interrupted, Mitigated, and Expressed. So it's a peer-led 12-phase recovery framework, plus workshops, guests, and of course, first looks at everything coming from the podcast and JBF. So this program was built because too many survivors are out there carrying something heavy with nowhere safe to put it down. And I know that feeling personally because I am a survivor. I may not be ready to share my full story yet, but honestly, that's exactly why the Survivor Circle matters so much to me. Because I don't have to have the words yet. I just have to show up. If any of this sounds like you, please come. Not when you're ready, not when you have the words. Now. Because you've carried this long enough and you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Please join us free at circle.janbrobergfoundation.org or just tap the link in the show notes. I really hope to see you there.
So I did go and take antidepressants for a period of time. I did come off them at one stage, but a lot of issues were happening with one of my daughters because we'd separated, and she has an eating disorder and her own mental health issues. And because I stopped focusing on me again and I focused on her, and then I went back down a spiral of, so I had to go back onto the medication and was on it for a few years. And like everybody, you have to try different ones to find what works. So it can be very, very difficult. But I have now been off medication for about 8 months, which is, for me, is great. But it's something that I say to people, don't be ashamed of. And once again, when you start saying to people, I actually take medication, they're like, oh, well, I do too. And it needs to be something that's talked about because it's happening to so many people. But there's still the stigmatism about mental health, which there shouldn't be, because I'm a very, very high functioning depressed person. I was still doing my job to what I'd say to a very high standard. So I'm the head of department. I manage a team of 11, belong to the senior management team, and nobody knew what was happening inside of me, like close friends, obviously, but no one knew. So as the journey then continued, I started talking about it more. And then you would actually see the shocked look on some people's faces. And I remember being in the staff room and one of my staff was saying something, because she hadn't started not feeling that great lately. And I said to her, you need to start focusing on you. I said, because you are in a very similar place to where I was. And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I used to sit in the staff room and I would think about the knives in the staff room, because we made lunch there. And she was like, my God, I could see the shock and horror in her face. And I said, well, I'm only telling you this now because I could actually see that you're on the same path. You're starting to talk about you're having gut issues, you've got thyroid problems, you're feeling very stressed and anxious, you've got 3 children like I did to deal with. You've got a husband, sometimes they're supportive, sometimes they're not. And I said, I just don't want the same things to happen to you. And that's, I suppose, one of the things that I wanted to offer. And that's why I speak out about it now in relation to mental health, because I still believe that we really don't speak about it enough.
Nope.
Being an educator, I've lost students to suicide, which is very upsetting. Yeah. Because you spend so much time with them, they become very important people in your life, and you would wish that they would come and speak to you more about what they were going through. But once again, it's not something that's encouraged in the school environment. We're told to shut kids down, basically, if they raise certain issues and move them along to the guidance officer. But when you've only got 2 guidance officers that work in a school with 1,500 children, they don't have access to them, and they also haven't got that relationship. They do
Right.
have that relationship with their teacher who they see on a regular basis, and it's it's a real shame that society has led us to the path where we're not meant to speak to children about these things when we're probably the support that they actually need.
Yeah, in fact, I thought that would be the place to start with, like, educating, giving trauma-informed education, making it a requirement for teachers, because often they're the first people that will notice this kid is pulling food out of the garbage can, or this one has some bruises on their arm. It's very difficult when it's assault and abuse because it doesn't show on the outside. But if you were taught principles of trauma, what trauma looks like, no matter what kind it was, whether you could see something physically or it was more of an emotional, mental, something that's off, I think a teacher is often the first person, especially if it's going on at home, because if a child's being abused at home, which is 70% of the time, it's in their
Yep.
home. It was in your home, even though it wasn't your parent, it was in your home where the
Mm.
abuse occurred. And that is typical. That is the vast majority. Well, obviously, the child, the young tween, and I liked how you said, I work with teenaged children. They are children. We look at these middle schoolers and these high schoolers and we think, well, they're just, they're moody, they're experimental, they're trying to find themselves. Yeah, every kid gets bullied, whatever, they're moody. And in reality, there's something happening that we are not seeing because we're not trained to see it. And we need that training. And then we need to be empowered to use it, because you cannot, in a school of 1,500, let's say half are boys and half are girls, that means that 4 out of every 10 kids in that school are suffering from abuse, some kind of assault or abuse. That's almost half the school. And yet we act like, oh,
Yeah.
it's the random 1 or 2, and it's not true.
No, and unfortunately, one of the students I referred to that did take her own life, she was in one of my classes. And, afterwards when you reflect and you see the signs, like she was moved out of my class because of timetabling issues. And she came to me and she said, why have I been moved? And she wasn't often in class, but she was like very intelligent, picked everything up really easily. I taught her sisters, so I knew that they had a hard home life. So, I was obviously tried to be considerate of that. But when I think back now, I realized when she came to say, why have I been moved? And I said, well, I think it's because you changed your maths class, but you can go and ask to change back, that she'd actually cut all her hair off. And now I realize that's, as I should have thought of at the time, that's a huge sign of someone that's been abused, or because she was trying to make herself unattractive to other
Not
people.
look like a girl. Yes.
Yeah.
And people never
Yeah.
think of that, but things like that are huge signals. I have a friend who started wearing hoodies, all the time to cover up her
Mhm.
long, really curly hair. And if I wear a hoodie and I dress more like a boy, maybe they'll leave me alone. Basically, was her. They
Yeah.
meaning multiple people who, starting with her father, but who was an FBI agent, by the way. So you literally don't know, but when you see something of a radical change, or even not, even a subtle change, but those are certainly things that could be said to a group of educators so that they could know, oh, there's something actually really wrong here. They have to at least get first in line to the guidance counselor or whatever.
Yeah.
That's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, so then unfortunately it was a few weeks later that she took her own life, and then it all came out afterwards that she had been abused, and then she left her sister. Her sister was on her own because the mother was already sort of off the rails and the father lived away, and then the sister sort of had nobody. And then, you want to reach out to that sister and help her, but because of the way the system is, you're not allowed to contact children outside of school or follow up on those things. So that that young lady was struggling, and she's just lost probably the closest person in the world, and her only family tie left. And you just hope that she'll turn up to school so you can try and check in on her, but that's the only way that we're able to. So, yeah, so that's all very hard. And I suppose one of the things that was difficult for me when that happened was my husband, we were away for the weekend and we heard it via social media, and he told me not to let it ruin our weekend. And I just thought to myself, I think that was the beginning and the end for me, because I just thought to myself, how could you say that about another human, taking their life, but let's not let it ruin our weekend. So, um,
Yeah, that's no go. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, so that was that. And then I suppose another thing that I suppose links to what I've done to now is, I remember standing in my kitchen and, I was married, I have 3 beautiful children, and they would just all become teens. And my husband spent a lot of time on his own social activities. And I've stood there and I just thought, I just feel lonely. Like I'm surrounded by people, at home, at work, but I just I just felt alone. Um, and that persisted with me for a very long time. And I think especially at this age, as your children are growing up, they they want you around, but they want you in the house, but they don't want to be with you.
Right.
And that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable.
And
But
just
they would
know that
spend all
that's
their
normal.
yeah,
They
that's
want you
normal.
around, but they don't necessarily want to be at home, or they want to bring their friends and then slam their doors.
Yes.
"Oh, we're glad you're here, Mom. Is there food in the fridge?"
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Or they'll grunt at you when they do come out to get the food. But, after the separation and I'm living on my, own, but with the children were living with me, but I'm still just sitting there at night thinking, scrolling through my phone or watching something on Netflix, thinking I still feel really, really alone.
Yeah.
And how am I going to sort of break this cycle of loneliness? And I think it's very difficult because I have friends in very similar situations, and you'd ring them up and you say, would you like to do this or whatever? And they might have younger children, or it's the week that they've got their kids, or, and so it's very hard to connect. And so that connection is what stops loneliness. And I wasn't able to get a lot of that. So I came up with this idea of like a hire a friend service. So it's called Ynkyer, and it's in the startup stages at the moment in Australia. And what it is, it's a way to connect people. So if you want to go out for a coffee, if you want to try a new restaurant, if you want to go to that Pilates class, and you don't want to go on your own, then you can contact someone on Ynkyer, and there is a fee, because obviously people only show up obviously when there's money involved sometimes,
Right.
but at least they're going to show up. Whereas that friend that you're going to text, they're going to make that excuse at the last minute, or something will pop up in their life too. So it's there to make genuine human connections. So I suppose the theory, the motto of it is to join our herd, or join the herd. So it's to create an environment. So it's all extremely safe, because they have to undergo identity checks to make sure that they're a real person. And then it's based on reviews of the people. So obviously the better the reviews, the more times that they might be used for something. So it's there for loneliness, obviously, for there was people like me, but also think of neurodiverse people
Mm.
that could find it hard to make friends, people that have just moved to a new state, country, area, and initially until they meet some people and get out, because since separating, I've had to do a lot of things on my own. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's very hard to go and sit at a restaurant and have dinner on your own. It's very hard to decide to go and start a new class, but that's what you've got to do to go and meet new people. And you have to be, I call it, very brave to do those things. So sometimes just to have that person there with you for the first time or one or two times, and then you might meet others, and then you might be, brave enough to venturing on your own. But if it just gives you that confidence, that's why I've came up with that business.
Yeah, that's half the battle, isn't it? To have the confidence to connect. It's interesting because we need connection. It's absolutely, again, and I always have to feel, I don't know why I have to feel like I have to say it. It's scientifically proven, but I want people to know this is real. If healing is going to happen, you cannot do it in a vacuum or in isolation. You absolutely have to have connection. And it's one of those things that loneliness, which is a lack of connection, loneliness, which is a deep sense of not belonging. Those are some of the, if you were to look up the word loneliness, you would see those things. And when you can find someone that wants to also get a coffee, go to a Pilates class, has a similar interest, all of a sudden you're not alone and you have connection and something to talk about, which is really important. So it's spelled IN, like Nancy, Ynkyer, right?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
Ynkyer. It'll be in our notes. And it's an Armenian word, you said, that means
Yeah, so
friendship.
so it means friend. And it's like when I was trying to brand it, I was looking for words about friendship and connection, and it's very hard to find things that haven't been taken. But
Yeah.
I liked it, but also my logo is yaks. I think yaks are cute, and the herd, and there's a bit of a connection there. So it just sort
I
of all
love
went
yaks, and
together.
they look fun. They're funny looking, and and on your logo, they're like looking and talking to each other.
Yes, that's right. And they're there and they're together and they're there for each other, and sort of that's the main thing. And that's probably one of the reasons why I have ended up in India, like you talked about. So for me, I've always volunteered. Like that's been a big part of my life, whether it's been sports or whether it's been teaching English as a second language for me, because that brings me in contact with people from different areas and I can learn so much from them. I've just finished my master's in education and teaching English as a second language. And I just think those people are so brave. Like they're so brave to move to another country
Mhm.
and leave their culture, leave their environment, and then not even speak the language. And then, they've come and so through those connections, I've actually met a lot of people from India,
Mhm.
and in particular the Punjabi region. We have a lot of Punjabis that live in Australia, and they've been amazing people. But I also found that they reconnect with other people from India when they come, like to Australia, because they have that community, they have that
Yeah,
culture. And one of
it's
the things I was
beautiful.
lucky enough to go to was so the Sikh Games. So in Australia, the Sikhs get together once a year and they play all different types of sports because they just love sport. And it's an amazing community feeling there. They supply the food, you don't pay for anything. And even me not being Sikh or Indian, I was still totally accepted, was able to participate in all areas. And I just thought I want to actually go to Punjab, where the Sikhs are mainly from, and see this wonderful area where these, for me, beautiful humans have come from that seem to have a lot of culture and connection. So that's how I've ended up in India. So there's an app called Workaway, and it is volunteer opportunities all around the world. Um, Obviously, being a single woman, it's safety, and because of my personal um, issues is big for me. So there's all these reviews that are on there where you're able to check everything out. And as you can see, like I've been in the community for a week and a half now, and they had this festival the other day, and one of the staff did all this henna, for me. They've just included me in the school. The children are beautiful. I've been able to teach them lessons. Students have invited me to their home, so I've gone on the school bus with them to their home, and I've met their families, and some of them speak really good English, and some don't, but we find a way to communicate. And even just being there, I'm living in the house with the principal, his wife, who's the managing director, and her mother. And I can't communicate with her mother, but she hugs me every morning. I sit there, I massage her hands as a way of showing her that I care and that I'm there. And it's just been a wonderful experience for me so far.
I love it. And tell me what the name of the organization is again that does the helps to place you in different.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just a connection site. So it's called Work Away,
Work
and
away.
it's Work Away, and it's just an app where volunteer places put up what's available. So it can be anything from teaching to go and doing social media to cleaning, just cultural connection. And it's a way that I am able to travel. I'm a sole income and income. I've been able to take leave from my job because got that entitlement there. But to be able to travel for 2.5 months would be too expensive. So, being able to give back and volunteer and have totally different experiences where, yes, I am volunteering and doing it, but I'm getting so much more, and I call it that fills my bucket. And as you said, that's a way of giving back is also a way of healing for me
Yes.
because it just puts me in touch with so many wonderful people who, like today, the school actually had a review. So the inspectors came and that was a very busy day for them. But yesterday, all the teachers, myself, the principal, we're all in the school. We're cleaning, we're getting everything ready to make sure it's good for the inspectors. But, we're there, we're laughing, we're having a good time. And it's just that community that they've welcomed me into, which I'm so thankful for.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And honestly, that to me is the final kind of piece really of healing. It's that continual giving back service. And it's healing you and it's also helping others in a huge way. And maybe because of your experiences, people will open up to you. And it's interesting, they don't even have to know. And somehow I think we put off a certain, I don't know, maybe it's a scent of healing. I don't know, that somebody feels safe with us and they'll trust to tell us things. Those are, and just what you're doing in your work and within that community is a huge service. And I just find that is the cycle of healing. To continue to heal, it has to include community, connection, and service. And in our trauma recovery circle, those are some of these steps basically in that healing process. And
Yeah.
as we're getting out our program, hopefully worldwide, the things that you've talked about today only support exactly what we have kind of deduced into a 12-month program of healing. And that somatic piece is there, and then the ongoing mental health piece is there, which includes service and the connection, which is all in the very beginning, understanding that you need some help. You're too lonely. You're
Mm.
too depressed. There's something wrong that you have to recognize. Why is my life sort of beautiful surroundings and I feel this way with, I have all the things that I should feel happy about. And if you don't, and you're wondering and questioning why, I can almost certainly guarantee that there is something from your childhood, from your past, that was so traumatic that it has shut down, like you said, your vagus nerve, your gut health, your central nervous system, your brain health. What is going on has to do with trauma. And so I have so enjoyed this conversation. Can you tell everybody about your book? the quiet crisis, understanding and healing loneliness in the modern world.
Yeah, so it will be released in the next few weeks on Amazon. So for me, when I've been exploring the business and also through my own growth and journey, I've thought it's something that we need to talk about. I just feel like in Western cultures, we've lost that sense of connection. I didn't even know my neighbors' names.
Yeah.
And when I say that to someone here in India, or from an Eastern culture, they just can't understand, how things could be like that. And, they have a joke and complain, about everybody knowing their business. But in the end, it's actually sort of lovely that people care enough to know their business. And that's that's what I've found lacking, that we are just so focused on ourselves in our cultures now that we've lost that care and compassion for others. My kids will sit there and come and tell me about a TikTok or a reel that they've watched where they've seen somebody hurt or killed or something. That's just like normal to them. And I just sit there and think, where has our compassion for other humans gone? We've
Yeah.
lost it, So through exploring all this, I decided that, for me, another part of healing is writing. So I love to write. So that's how the idea for the book came up. My psychologist actually told me to write. So I started a blog and I did that. Then I moved to social media where I put my journey and story on there, which is One Row, Many Roads on Instagram. And you can see my travels through India if anybody's interested. And I started writing, and then the idea of the book came up. And because it links well with my business idea, I just thought it's something that we need to discuss further. And that's something that I'm really keen to speak further about, because especially women of this age, where we talk about, we're saying to become empty nesters, our children are leaving or have their own lives.
Yeah.
And quite more often in Australia, I think the divorce rate's 50% now. So we're quite often on our own, and
Yeah.
it's
That's about the same here.
yeah, it's loneliness comes in for everybody. And I mean, it's not just women, I have male friends in similar situations, but because women are often told we hit our 40s, we're perimenopausal, we're moving into menopause, everything's about to dry up,
Yeah.
life's about to get worse.
Yeah.
Nothing seems like anything's going to get better. For,
God.
for me, that's why I sort of focus on that age and that time.
Yeah.
Because I'm there, but also because I think we need to change the mindset of that. We need to look like that, the next part of our lives is going to be absolutely amazing.
Yes. And I can definitely say amen to that, because my life goes like the roller coaster. There's ups and there's downs, but it's only gotten better. It only roller coasters up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because of my ability to think in a positive way, or in a way that is recreating myself. What's the next project? How can I help? What can I do to serve? And I think those are the secrets to living a fulfilled life into your 40s and 50s and 60s, and I'm taking care of my mother who has Alzheimer's now, and she lives in my home. And it's so sad to me, to watch her not really know where she is, or who we are sometimes, but not all the time. But because she's the one that went back and became the social worker, and she wrote the book, and the first book that got us our first documentary. And then we worked on the story, and wrote even more details into the second book, and got to tell that story in the 9-part series on Peacock, A Friend of the Family, and that documentary that was also on Peacock, A Friend of the Family, True Evil. And I look at my mother, and why I have all of these things, it's because of her and what she wrote. So writing, I also agree, is a huge therapy. It was for her in writing our story, but she saved everything, and she knew somehow that we should have these huge bins of proof of our life and what
Yeah.
we went through, and to be able to refer to those things to write the story. And all of that has given me the opportunity now to heal in a way that I didn't know maybe was possible. I didn't even know that I needed it because I was such a, well, that's over. Now let's move on. Let's just pretend like everything's fine, because that's really
Yeah.
what you do as a young teenager, as a college student. You just want to fit in. You just want to look like you're fine. And I did that for a lot of years. And now to really be looking and seeing how many more people are coming forward, they are getting help sooner. They're getting to the point of going, I get it. I think the trauma in my life actually has affected my life. And even though you were convinced, no, that doesn't, nothing, I'm fine, go to the gym one more time, you had not gotten to the source of the trauma. And it really is the thing. And I'm so grateful that you were able to share all of these things with us. I just want to, and we'll put it in our show notes, but I want to say your Instagram handle one more time. It's at the word spelled out ONE.RO, your name, dot many, MANY, dot roads, ROADS. One row, many roads. I really love that.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to say that was left unsaid?
No, I think you just have to know you need to keep exploring until you find the right thing that works for you. Everyone tells you, oh, just to see the psychologist or to take the pills or to do whatever. If you think that something is not right, then it's not right. And like, even I looked at things like chanting because there's so many, so much research on that and it works in, Eastern cultures. But I'm just sort of like, I started doing it because a Indian friend gave me a chant to help me, but it wasn't connecting for me. So in the end, I thought, well, I have to make it personal, and I wrote down 5 things that were going to be important for me. One of the things was setting boundaries. So I said, I will set boundaries. I'm worthy of love. I have the power. And I started chanting those things over and over and over to myself again. And
Oh,
that really connected with me and worked because it gave my brain something else to think about other
yeah.
than the negative thoughts, and then changed my mental attitude. And just by doing those little things, which you think are little, but actually have
Huge.
a really big effect on you, but you have to make it work for you. Like, I could give you the advice to chant those 5 things, but they might not be meaningful to you. So
Right.
use those people's experiences, but twist it so that it works for you.
Well, I love that. I really do, because it is true. It's a very personal journey, and yet it is a journey of connection and trying things and working through things and letting the right pieces in to your life and work for you. You have to find your way. I love the idea of having sort of a daily mantra, that because I did that for a long time. I was trying to really find more self-love, self-worth. A lot of that is just, you're just robbed of it. And when this happens to you, you just don't feel worthy anymore. You just don't feel like you like yourself, or, you just don't feel those things. And some of the things that I did in the mirror about telling myself this mantra that, I love who I see there. I love you. Even if I didn't believe it, I love you. And I have other things that I've written down and that I've said to myself, but that one, when I was really working on my self-care, was so important for me to find self-love and self-worth again. Wherever you're at in your journey, anybody who has listened to our discussion today, just start. Just start. Just know you're worthy of being able to start, whether it's finding CBT, finding a somatic, healer therapist. If go and serve somebody, go talk to somebody, tell your parent that you trust, something that you've kept holding on to forever. Find a beginning point and someone you can trust to share with.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The hardest thing to do is to start, like, because you're just lost and, you're Googling everything. And I spent so much time Googling anxiety and depression, And then I was like to myself, well, I was spending all this time doing this. How about you actually spend some time doing something about it? So once you start, the ball starts rolling and things will improve.
They will. Thank you
They will.
so much for being here, Ro.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really, really enjoyed my time.
It was amazing. And I hope that your time in India and wherever you're going next brings you, again, more connection, more peace, more love. You deserve it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Austin Tanner, and I'm Jan's son and the executive producer of this podcast. On behalf of our whole team, we want to thank you for listening to our show today. These conversations are not always easy, and we don't take it lightly that you stayed with us all the way through. Everything you heard today can be found in our show notes. You'll find links to our website, janbrobergfoundation.org, our newsletter, and how to join our free online community, the Survivor Circle. This is where the work continues between episodes, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for listening today and for being part of our survivor-led movement. Until next time, over and out on 2.